All right, start your flow today in a wide leg standing forward bend. Prasarita Padottanasana. Take a big stretch up once you get your feet separated as far as you'd like. And then on your exhale, fold down, and you can situate your legs as you fold in. So if you feel like you can scoot your feet a little farther apart, take your time here to settle in to this wide leg forward bend. All 10 toes point to the long edge of your mat. I like to walk my hands forward a little bit, kind of like a downward facing dog shape. This helps me to feel where my hips are habitually moving towards. So my hips like to fall back. I want to keep them up over my ankles instead of letting them come back behind the heels. And then once you feel what your core muscles need to do in order to keep your hips lined up, then you can start to walk your hands back towards your feet or even farther behind your feet and let your head come down towards the floor or block or blanket. Keep pressing down equally into both feet and engage your thighs and your belly. Play with some different arm variations that feel best to your body here. You can flip your palms out and up. You can grab your big toes. You can flip your hands back through your legs, palms up. And so whatever modification you're playing with here, we're just taking a moment to open up those inner thighs and get your shoulders warmed up. We're going to practice an arm balance today. And so you're preparing with this practice your body for the arm balance. On an inhale, lift up halfway, exhale there, and then press into both feet and continue to lift all the way up. Standing pose. With wide legs still, so turn your right toes out, left toes in, reach up, big stretch, both legs are straight, exhale, triangle, Trikonasana. Your right hand to your right shin, or if you're taking your left side first, left hand to your left shin. I like to take that top arm behind and wrap it around so I can help to remind the right thigh or your front thigh to externally rotate. You might need to give your right knee or your front knee a bend once or twice just to, situate your thigh bone, but look down to your front foot and make sure that your knee and your second toe are lined up, pointing in the same direction. And again, externally rotate that right thigh. Check out your right shoulder or your front shoulder and make sure it's not turning in or popping up, and softly open that shoulder. Then go back with that idea of lengthening out the side, lengthening your right thigh, and then you can stretch your top arm back up to the ceiling. Press firm back into the heel of the back leg. With your next inhale, press into your feet to lift up, and we'll switch sides. Turn the toes in, and then switch sides. Left leg turns out, left toes turn out, right toes angle in, or if you're switching to the right side, switch sides. Big stretch up, inhale, straight legs. Exhale, let your left hand split down to your left shin and allow your hips to move as a result of leaning out over your left leg rather than moving your hips in order to lean out. So again, I'm going to take that top arm and wrap it around behind just to give myself a manual adjustment. Externally rotating the front thigh. Your back heel should be pointing back. It should not be parallel with your mat. It should actually be pointing to the corner of your mat, and then your toes angle in. Again, check out your front knee to make sure the toes and the knee point in the same direction. And that shoulder, open up that shoulder, soften the top trapezius area of the neck, top neck and upper back area. Press out through the ball of your front foot and really feel your calf muscles extending the ankle or plantar flexing the ankle. And then reach your top arm back up for a big stretch from fingertip to fingertip. And as you're ready, you're going to come back up to stand, pushing into your feet. Inhale, lift back up. All right. You can hop back together in a standing pose. Samastitihi. Take a couple breaths here, and then we're eventually going to come to the top of the mat. Once you're at the top of your mat in Samastitihi, interlace your fingers behind your back, stretch your arms out away from your sacrum, and then start to pull the backs of your knuckles up to your back and flatten out your interlaced palms. So your palms are facing out, and you're stretching your wrists out. We're preparing for pyramid pose. You can also take your knuckles to each other, so create a fist and press your fists together, or any way that you can play with your own expression of reverse prayer here. Maybe it's grabbing opposite elbows or grabbing opposite wrists. I'm going to slide my fingers up for reverse prayer, step left leg back, heels line up, left toes angle forward. And then as you fold out over your right leg, just fold lengthwise out and then let your chest soften down. Now, once you fold, your prayer pose might get a little sloppy. So keep pressing the heels of your hands together or your knuckles together or your fists together, whatever you're doing, whatever option you have. And you're doing that by engaging your biceps. Press back into that left heel and lift and lengthen halfway. Inhale, and then the rest of the way up all the way to stand. Step forward. Inhale, reach your arms up, giving those wrists a break. And then exhale, release your hands back down to your sides. Okay, so again, take your hands behind your back. If you've kept your fingers in the interlaced position with the backs of your hands against your back, when you step back for pyramid and fold, feel the muscles under your backs of your hands. Feel the muscles of your back under your hands engaging to prevent a drop or a slump in this pose. Once you get your right foot stepped back, you may have to step it back a little bit farther or even shorten the stance a little bit. And here under your hands, feel your back muscles strong. You can take your knuckles together, your fists together. You can then slide your hands up for that reverse prayer. Again, use your biceps to press your palms together. And keeping your elbows in a straight line. Press down into that left foot simply to lift the left hip higher. So we're not focusing on squared hips here. That is not a main focus in this alignment focus. That doesn't matter. Instead, think about level hips instead of squared hips. So trying to get the hips at the same height. Pressing firmly into both feet. Keep those legs equally strong. And then on your inhale, lengthen out halfway and then continue the rest of the way up. Release your arms and step forward with your right foot. Samastitihi. Hands at heart center for just a moment. Catch your balance here and just feel grounded and equal here. Big inhale, reach up. And then as you exhale, forward bend, Uttanasana. We're going to come down to seated for turtle prep, Kurmasana. So take as long as you'd like in a standing forward bend or in a standing Tadasana just to refocus. Once you get down to seated, feet come together and your feet are much farther away from your hips than they normally would be in a bound angle shape. So you've got a giant diamond shape in your legs. Inhale to open and soften, and then exhale, take advantage of the space and soften even more down into your forward bend. So my head coming to my feet, my hands are on my feet, just kind of helping to assist. You can use a block on top of your feet or a pillow. You're not forcing your knees down to the ground here. Just let your knees relax. Let your hips scooch back as much as they need. And then if you'd like to add on, you can start to thread your arms under your legs around to the tops of your feet with your hands. And when you're pulling with your hands on your feet, it's not a downward motion, it's more of a forward motion. So you're pulling back with your feet to stretch your chest forward and to stretch your head towards your toes. Eventually, you can tuck your head down behind your heels. That sometimes fires up a big core engagement and causes the front core line to cramp. So before we move on, let's come back up to seated. Take your legs out straight and your hands behind you, and then lift up your chest and stretch out the front core line. All right, take as long as you'd like here in a nice little back bend, opening your heart, and then we'll add on, seeing if you can deepen into that turtle prep a little bit more. And so take the next few progressions as you can, know when to not go deeper and know when to back off. Back into that wide leg diamond shape, except this time, scoot your feet apart away from each other. And then take your hands underneath your legs, arms underneath your legs, and you can start to straighten your arms out a little bit. So eventually what's going to happen is your arms are going to point back away from you. So there's going to be an inward rotation of your shoulders. So I'm going to start to stretch my legs apart even more and then take my shoulders down towards the floor. Now here you might want a couple blocks to prop up your shoulders or your chest. And now here my arms are starting to straighten back. And then I can start to scooch my heels out and fold down to the floor. Be careful not to let your butt lift off the floor here. And then if you can, engage your thighs and lift your heels off the ground. You're keeping your core engaged though to keep your bottom from lifting and to keep your back from over rounding. And only stay here as long as it's comfortable, especially on those elbows. That can hurt. Take your legs back in together and then take your hands behind you again for that stretch up to give the core a break. All right, we'll come into Tirang Mukha Ekapada Paschimottanasana. It's an oblique facing one leg forward bend. So you're going to bend your left knee behind you with your heel, point the toes back, point the knee forward, and then fold out over your right leg. You might need a little height here under the right hip, so you can sit on a pillow or a block. You're not forcing your hips to be level here. Just let them not twist, but kind of drop off to the side. So the left hip is higher, fine. Press out through your right foot and then inhale, lift up to seated, just there for a nice brief moment. And then I'm going to add on, take the right leg out wide and refold. This might cause some inner right knee pain, so be careful with that. When you scoot your right leg out to the right, don't let the left foot move to the left. So reposition your left knee if it's moved. And again, sit up on something if you need. Okay, just another moment here. Breathe in, nice smooth breath in through your nose, pumping the breath from the belly. Enjoy this forward fold as long as you'd like, but when you're ready, come back up to a seated position and then take your left leg out to straight. And now your right knee is going to bend, foot coming behind you. The right knee points straight forward, top of your right foot on the floor. Point your right big toes straight back. Again, if the right hip is higher than the left, that's fine. Do not force it down. So uneven hips here is expected. Press out through your left heel though and keep pressing back through your right toes. So instead of pushing the right hip down, instead think stretching your chest over your knee and using your core to balance your hips rather than your right hip pushing down or your right knee pushing into the floor. Okay, and then I'm going to add on to that next option. So if you know this didn't work for you on the first side or you just know you don't like this position, skip it and stay a little longer in the previous progression. Again, be careful here when you're forward folding out over the wide left leg to keep the right knee pointing straight forward and the toes pointing straight back. This one always feels really open to me, so take an extra breath or two here if it feels good. This is basically the shape of the arm balance that we're going to prepare for Ekapada Bakasana 2. It's one leg crane, the second version, or the second expression. Okay, when you're ready, inhale, come back up to seated, and you can take the right leg out in front of you again, and come into an easy seated cross-leg position just to center and just to ground for a moment. Feel balance in your sit bones. Feel your ears over your shoulders, over your hips, back of your head, over the back of your heart, over the back of your sacrum. And then lean back, way back over your sacrum with your head so you can lift your feet for boat pose, Pariparnavasana, either with a bent knee or straight leg. Reach your arms forward, lift your chest, engage that deep core line to stretch your head back diagonally over your hips. Feel your low back. You shouldn't be rounding, so if you are, your hands might need to come to the floor behind you to help lift up your heart and encourage the natural low back extension. So it shouldn't be excessive, just natural low back extension. All right, and then take your feet down. And come back to seated staff pose for just a moment. Wide leg forward bend, Upavishta Konasana. Separate your feet. Just start small at first and then start to lengthen out over the midline of that wide angle that your legs have created. And then when you're here, maybe elbows to the floor or blocks, you might move your feet a little farther apart. Make sure that your toes don't turn in. And then if you'd like to lay down on blocks or bolsters or the floor, chin to the floor or chin to a bolster. And then you can take your hands out to your big toes. Keep pressing your sit bones back. Keep pressing out through your feet. And keep using your abdominals to drive the backs of your thighs down to the earth so your hips aren't popping up. Big belly breath here. So use the belly breath, calming your mind. Inhale, come back up. And then take your legs back in together. Staff pose. Take as long as you need in staff or an easy seated pose. And then when you're ready, come over to hands and knees into tabletop. So if you want to pause the video and just take a few moments to rest, catch your breath. Once you're ready, plank pose. So strong plank we're going to hold here, trying to take your shoulders farther over your middle backs of your hands rather than the back inside wrist. Engage your thighs. Feet are farther apart, so slightly farther apart. And then maybe even slightly farther apart than your hips. All 10 toes, press your heels up to the ceiling. Press into the palms of your hands and spread those fingers so you can think about pressing your chest forward. And then engage your thighs and drop your tailbone without tucking it. Zip your belly button up without rounding your spine. Take that into side plank. Scoot your feet together first so your legs create a staff, a giant singular staff, and then roll over to your right hand and right foot. The right hand does not move center. The right hand stays where it was in plank. You can look up to the ceiling or you can look down to your right hand if balance seems too shaky here. Try to avoid lifting your hips too high and try to avoid rolling your right hip back. So we're not back bending and we're not side bending. Keep squeezing those legs together and then roll back over into plank pose. And keep squeezing those legs together. Go over to your left. So your left hand came over for plank, and then you moved right over into side plank. So the left hand did not come under your chest. Your shoulder should not be behind your wrist. Feel your arms line up, feel your hips line up, and feel your toes line up. So if you feel like your right heel is falling back farther than the left, turn your right hip to the side of the room more. So the right hip is probably falling back too far. Keep stretching up with your right hand. And again, your gaze can look up or down. Zip your belly in and turn over to plank pose. Downward facing dog, separate your feet apart. Open your chest. If downward facing dog is too much work after all of that wrist work, give your wrists a break because we are going to use them again. So you could take child's pose instead. But just a few rounds of breath to ground equally between all four corners, hands, feet, hips, and shoulders. Right, and then come up into Malasana. You're going to walk your feet up under your belly button and then squat down behind your heels. If you can, feet together, all 10 toes pointing straight forward. If your feet need to separate, fine. Leave your toes pointing forward though. And then let your knees open so you can fold down inside your thighs. Drop your hips towards your heels. So if your heels don't quite hit the floor, you can take your hands back under and put your hands under your heels. Or if your heels are easily on the floor, you can grab the backs of your ankles and then start to create more of a ball here. So you're pulling in, nose towards toes, hips towards heels. Malasana garland pose. Wrapping your arms like a piece of garland around the backs of your heels. And this is a really good prep for Bakasana, which we'll move into next, crane. So crane is the first arm balance to play with before moving on to the one-leg crane. So knees up in the backs of your armpits, arms start straight, hands forward out on the mat, and then start to rock over your toes to your hands. Maybe your feet lift, maybe they stay on the ground. Round your back, drop your butt, and start to press your arms towards straight. So try not to lift your bottom too high. Stay here for just as long as you can. Come back down and then forward bend here and shake it out. So again, you might get that nice little core cramp. It's not so nice. So inhale all the way up, reverse swan dive, stretch up. And give yourself a break in a standing pose. Take as long as you need and as many stretches as you need before moving on to the next arm balance. Tadasana is a great place to stand and ground and center those four corners, your shoulders and your hips. And then your hands at heart and your feet on the floor. All right, big stretch up, inhale. And fold, exhale, Uttanasana. All right, we're going to go for Ekapada Bakasana 2. Squat back down into the prep for crane. So back into the garland squat. One leg is going to be in crane and the other leg is going to straighten out like we did in our turtle shape or our wide angle shape. So prep into crane, keep one heel squeezing to the butt on the back of the knee or the knee on the back of the arm, and then your other leg straightens out. And it can touch the floor. Maybe your right toes touch the floor if your right knee is on the back of your arm. And then pull that left foot back in, give it a break. Maybe you want to try it again. Maybe you've had enough of it. I'm going to stretch out my core because I'm getting that darn cramp again. And if you want to sit for a moment in Virasana, this is a great stretch for your thighs. Also a good centering place before side 2 or before moving on to that same side again. So play with this as many times as you'd like. If this is not a familiar shape to you, rewind, go back and try it again. I'm going to move on to the second side and maybe you'll get some other pointers on this side. So here you can see my left knee is staying on the back of my arm. My arms are slightly bending. Keep squeezing the heel up to the butt and then straighten that right leg out. You've got to drop your hips down here and look forward. If your head goes down, you go down in a somersault. And on the straight leg, it's the inner thigh moving onto the back of that same side arm. All right, when you're done with that big stretch up, inhale, Samastitihi, exhale. So again, if you want to go back and play with that a few times, use some blocks under your toes, have some fun with it. When you're finished with your arm balancing, I'm going to cool down and you can join me when you're ready. Inhale, big stretch. Exhale, fold, Uttanasana. Step your left leg back, lower your left knee down, low lunge, Anjaneyasana. Inhale. Exhale, take your hands down to your mat and step back, downward facing dog. Start to lower your knees to the floor. And then inhale, come forward into Ashtangasana, 8-point pose, 8-limb pose. So that's toes, knees, chest, chin, and hands. Inhale into a cobra or up dog. Use your exhale, downward facing dog. Left foot steps forward, right knee down. And then on your next inhale, reach your arms up, low lunge. Take your hands to the mat and step forward with your right foot. Exhale, fold, Uttanasana. Push into your feet, inhale, Urdhva Hastasana. Samastitihi, exhale, standing pose. Let's do the second side. Inhale, reach. Exhale, fold. Right leg steps back this time, right knee to the ground. Inhale, stretch your arms up, opening the front of that right hip. Anjaneyasana. Place your palms, exhale, and step back, downward facing dog. Big breath here. Inhale, knees down, come forward way beyond your fingertips. Bend your elbows, chest and chin tap, hips stay up. And then come down to your hips. Inhale, cobra. Exhale, up and back, downward facing dog. Step your right foot forward, lower your left knee down, and inhale, low lunge, reach your arms. Replace your hands on the floor at the top of your mat and step up with your left leg. Fold, exhale, Uttanasana. Big stretch up, inhale, and exhale. Come all the way down to the ground. Sit down, lower down, hug your knees into your chest, Apanasana. Give yourself a little rock and roll, smash out your back. And then I'll take bridge pose for a stretch. I'm going to lift my arms up overhead first and then lift my hips up. And if this is feeling fine on your shoulders and your back, you could then take your arms underneath your body, walk your shoulders closer together and maybe even closer towards your heels. Keep your feet as far apart as you'd like in this pose and also angle your toes out a little bit. That will help with the SI joints and low back pain in this posture. We really just want to feel and focus on the hips pressing up and back towards your chest so you can get that wonderful stretch in the front of your hips, your belly, and really fire up those glutes and those hamstrings because we stretch the heck out of them in this class. In this practice. Keep breathing from your belly and maybe even check it out. Watch it pump. It's pretty cool. And then lower yourself back down when you're ready, nice and slow. One more time, big hug, knees to chest. I like to lift everything up into a tight little ball and then let it all soften down to the floor. I'm going to land in constructive rest, and I'm just going to take my feet a little farther away from my hips forward towards the top of my mat. And my knees are not going to rest against each other. They're just going to stay in the air. And this gives my low back a minute to relax after all that forward bending. Soften your shoulders, soften your face, your jaw, and your mind. And just feel your energy come back to a normal state here, along with your breath. Take as long as you'd like here to rest, but as always, at the end of your practice, bow to you and tell yourself thanks. Good job.